It's how do you prove the existence of God through logic? Now, obviously, I can't prove the existence of a religious type of God, but you can prove the existence of God through pretty simple logic practice. And coming from, as I did, a background in which I was taught a lot of things that that were not true, right? Through a religious cult. Hey, Luxar. Hey, Pamela. Hey, Gustavo. It's good to see you. Today, it shifted how I thought about things and about the world. And so there was a way in which, good evening, there was a way in which I understood that, and I had an experience of God, not in a religious way, but after having been, having so much of what I had been taught and believed turning out to be a lie, it was something that I really questioned. I wondered about, was God. And that's just a fundamental thing of our whole lives. So whether you call it God or goddess or, it doesn't have a gender. And it's unfortunate that in English, we don't have a word for that. That's something that I would like to change, that we don't have a word for sort of a non-gendered concept of God. But that's not the point of today. Today, I want to walk you through something really cool, which is a logical process to prove the existence of God. Now, logic is a very special thing. Logic is a process, and you have to start in any logic process. You have to start with something you can truly know in order to get to an accurate result. So if you start with something that's false, then your logical result will be false. So it's really just a process, like, adding, like math. It's that kind of a process. I'm not going to get too deep into that aspect of logic, but what I want to talk about today is how to prove that God exists through logic. And it's really quite fun. And when you understand how to do it, like for me, it just shifted things for me in a very fundamental way, in a subtle but fundamental way, because you may believe that God exists and you may talk about it and, have this sense, maybe an internal sense, maybe an experience of it. But as I know, those kinds of things can be manipulated. So let's walk through the logical process of understanding how God exists. Okay. Hi, Kate. So it's pretty cool. We're going to start with the one thing that we can know. There's one thing that you can know no matter what, right? And I want you to think about this. And that is, I am conscious. I am aware. I'm aware of something. If you're watching this, you're aware of watching me. You're aware of watching this feed, okay? So you're aware of something. Now, science tells us and logic tells us that the things we're aware of don't necessarily exist in the way that we are aware of them. The plant there is not green. We see it as green. Our brain interprets this feed as green. It interprets things as having color and having different types of form, right? But they don't necessarily exist at a quantum level or at a scientific level in that way. But what can we know? We can know that because I am conscious, because I'm aware of something, therefore something exists. See? Something exists. Because I am aware. I am conscious. I'm aware that I'm looking at something. I'm hearing something. I am feeling something. I'm experiencing something. There's something that I'm aware of. Now, how do we move that into this process? So if I can be aware of one thing, if I can be aware that I'm conscious, at least that I am aware, right? And I don't mean like the eternal consciousness. I just mean, I'm watching this, I'm hearing this, I am seeing something. There's something that I'm aware of. I have thoughts in my mind. Okay. That means that something exists. And so we want to start at the very, very core, at the very fundamental, the very first level, right? We don't even have to know how it exists or why or exactly what form it exists in. We don't have to know that stuff. We just have to know that one teeny weeny little thing, something exists. It's because I am conscious of it. Now, let's start the logic, okay? If I know that something exists, then I know that there is something. It sounds simple, right? There is something. Something is here. So when I start there, if something exists, then how did it get here, right? How does it exist? Something exists. So something either created it, right? Or something always existed. Now, for something to exist, people say there's two options there, really, right? Actually, there's only one, and you'll see why based on logic, right? So there's a concept called self-creation, which means that it created itself. The problem with that, right, is that if something created itself, then it had to exist before it existed. That's a logical impossibility. Something can't exist before it existed. See? So the other option is that something always existed. This is called self-existence, right? So that we have self-creation and we have self-existence. Self-creation is a logical impossibility. Something cannot have existed before it existed. Self-existence, while difficult for us to understand, self-existence means it's always existed. Always. Now, because our brains and how we function are bounded by time and by space, it can be hard for us to conceptualize something that's existed always, because we always have a beginning and an end to stuff, right? We live, we die, sun comes up, sun comes down. There's always a beginning and an end constantly in the way our minds interpret the world. So it can be hard for us to understand something that's always existed, but just because it's hard to understand doesn't mean it's not accurate, okay? Because when we understand, that's not a logical impossibility, but self-creation is a logical impossibility. So we can know, right? We can know, there's a second thing we can know. One, I know I'm aware. I'm aware of something. Number two, I can know that for something to exist, something had to make it exist. Something had to create it, right? It had to have a start somewhere. And whether you think that was just a little flutter of energy or whether you think it was a conscious being that designed and created it, that doesn't even matter right now at this point in the process, okay? So something existed, self-creation, logical impossibility. So we know, the second thing we know is something has always existed. That's what we can know through logic, okay? When I know that through logic, what is that thing? What is that first cause? That first little thing that we can know, that first little thing that I know that something has always existed, and that is the core, the foundation, that is what all of this comes from, all of this stuff that I experience, all of this world, this creation, this whatever it is, me, that is a creation from that first thing. That came from that first thing. To me, that is God. That first thing, that first creative force, that first thing that's always existed, that's God, right? That's really how when we think about God, we have all of these layers of stories, and depending on what religion you're from, there's all of these stories about God and all of these, from the very earliest time in history, we have this like myths that we think about, right? But take it down to its absolute core, there's something we can actually know. There's something we can actually prove through logic. We can't prove these different myths and stories that people tell us, but we can prove that I'm conscious, something exists, and for it to exist, it had to have always existed. Okay. And that is how you can prove the existence of God. Not the existence of a religious God, no, but the existence of the creative first force. That's what I think of as God. So there's another thing you can prove, though, and I'm not going to talk about it today. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow or another day. But there's another element of what God, how I think of God, goddess, whatever you want to call it, creative force. There's another element of something that you can prove when you start from this core. And we'll talk about that maybe tomorrow. But think about it, okay? This is so powerful for me because when I was questioning everything, I really had to go back and literally question everything I'd ever been taught, everything I'd ever believed. And it's a great exercise to go and do this. Everything you were told is true. Everything you were told is history. Everything. Question it all, because why? It's stories, things that people made up. Thank you for the hearts. I appreciate it. Hey, Jose. Hey, Kate. So that is the core, right? That's so exciting because now you can actually prove something through logic about the existence of God. And that is so beautiful to me because I wanted something that I could actually know. And I can only know something if I can prove it outside of the existence of other people's experiences, of sources, of books, of other stuff like this. Those are not proof. Those are not, when I'm talking about logical, fundamental proof, right? Like a mathematical equation. This is what I'm talking about. So you can prove that God exists just with that simple, teeny tiny exercise. Now, there's lots of elements of what people say that God is, or what people talk about as God, that you can't prove through this process, okay? But you can prove the one core thing, that there is a God, right? Not the way people think about God, not this, guy in the sky who's there to judge you or do all this sort of stuff. That's all, none of that. We're not there. Okay, we're just talking about that initial creative thing that had to have always existed in order for us to have anything that is right now, in order for us to be aware of anything. That's the core of understanding that God or goddess, whatever. We gotta come up with a new word for this, don't we? Because I get frustrated when I'm like, God, goddess, when I'm really just trying to talk about this core, energetic, creative force that is the reason that we have all of this, right? That's the initial thing, the initial reason for everything that we're doing, for all of this. So, yeah, like I said, it's totally outside of any kind of religion. It's simply, how did we get here, right? It's exploring that process. How did we get here? What is this? And how can we learn more? This is the exciting thing. When you have a process, you have a way to figure out more. You can figure out more things that are accurate if you start with an accurate process, and you start with that process at the one thing you can actually know. Now, I didn't make this up. I didn't figure this out myself. I wasn't that smart. But a very good friend of mine who is brilliant in logic and strategy, and numerous other people before that. This is actually a fundamental logic process that is shockingly not that well known. But if we did use it more, we would have a lot more accurate information to go from. So what did this do for me in my life? This really helped me to when you have a foundation, when you have something you can stand on, you can say, this I know. Like there's lots of other stuff I can't know that I don't know because lots of other people told me lots of other bullshit, basically lies of all kinds. And, that took away that sense of trust, sort of that childlike thing where you just believe everything people tell you. But we're adults now. We shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't just be believing things other people tell us, other stories that people handed down to us that may or may not be true, right? So many factors went into creating these stories. But we can know, when I found out what I could know, that was enough. Just that little teeny bit that I could be absolutely certain of, right? That was enough. That was enough to shift it for me, to give me that foundation, right? That toehold. I could just put my foot right there and I could say, this is certain, this I know. And from there, you can build. All you need is one little toehold and that you're absolutely certain about. And from there, you can build. You can build so many beautiful, amazing things. You can build more things that you can know. So start just with that one little bit. Start with that tiny little bit of what you can know. That God, that as a creative force, the initial thing that began all of this, everything that we now experience, the universe, all of it, there's a little place that started, that core place, okay? And that is God. To me, that is God. That is the creative force. The second thing you can know is super cool, and that will give you a whole new perspective on God, what this God entity is, particle is, whatever you want to call it, right? I don't even care. So we'll talk about that tomorrow, okay? Hey, Knox, good to see you. So I just finished talking about this, but I'm going to post this video. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. And go back and rewatch it. It's something really cool. All right. Okay. You guys have a beautiful Sunday and enjoy it. Thank you for the hearts. Have a beautiful Sunday. And I will see you tomorrow and we will continue this conversation. Okay. Don't miss it. This is something really cool. All right. Take care. Bye.